please tell us which electorates you're visiting and what sort of people you're meeting out there?
Yeah, Fred, so we're in 4 electorates, as you mentioned: Orange, Bathurst, Dubbo and the Upper Hunter. Now, these are fairly critical parts of the state in terms of the upcoming election, and we might get into that into a minute, but the kinds of people that we're meeting with are local business groups and local people here that are employed in those key sectors in coal, agriculture, transport and manufacturing that are going to be bearing the brunt of a lot of these emission mandate policies. As you know, both sides of politics in New South Wales, the Coalition and Labor, have committed to the net zero emissions by 2050 target. So there's a lot of people in the regional and rural parts of the state that are looking for a choice.
Yeah, so, I mean, essentially you're talking about middle Australia, aren't you?
Yeah, that's exactly right. There's a lot of mainstream Australians here, not just employed directly in those industries, but don't forget all of the flow-on industries that feed off those critical sectors like retail, hospitality and so forth. They're all going to be negatively impacted when these jobs go. Now, we hear a lot of glib promises from politicians that come here and say, well, we're going to have all these new green jobs and everything's going to be fine. But I've got to tell you that firstly, that's just not true. You know, our research shows, for example, that over the last decade, for every one job destroyed for every one job created in the renewable sector, 5 jobs have been destroyed in the manufacturing sector. But it's also not holding water here with the locals who do not believe city-based politicians when they make these promises.
Yeah, we'll get to the transition, the so-called transition to renewables in a minute, because I want to play you a little take of Chris Bowen talking about exactly that. But firstly, I mean, the people in the regions, they make city life possible. I mean, they're producing the food, they're digging up the coal, they're making the energy that turns city lights on. Do you think, what's the mood like out in that region now, and what sort of flow-on effect do you think it will have in the cities?
Well, there's palpable anger and discontent that they're not being listened to. Like you say, this is a part of the world, like I'm in Bathurst right now and we've just been to Dubbo. This is a part of the country that puts food on the table of families. They keep the lights on. They earn the export revenue, which is then reinvested into critical social infrastructure like schools, roads, hospitals, law and order, that everybody benefits from. But they're being taken for granted by those in the inner cities who not only don't listen to or have any real care for those in the regions, but they're actively imposing these policies on them. For example, you don't see anyone advocating for solar panels or massive wind farms on Bondi Beach or on the North Shore of Sydney. No, they're saying, well, everybody else has to deal with these policies, but the inner city elite don't have to face the realities of what it means to have these renewables projects, which take up an enormous amount of land, getting built on prime agricultural land, undermining our agricultural sector while we shut down the coal mines that give us 24/7 baseload power. Well, how are we going to have a manufacturing sector or heavy industry when we've got nothing to power it? But these realities simply are not being heard by our political leaders in the cities, whether it's Sydney, Melbourne or Canberra. They're not listening to what the locals in the regions have to say.